Hey there guys, this is Obsidian Chill. Got another video for today. And in this one, we're taking a look at what I feel to be one of the more misunderstood aspects of DCUO Online, and that's how stat buffs work. So the general idea, or what I feel or read a lot on the forums in game or hearing from players, is that they believe stat buffs are multiplicative. And actually so that means is, say you have 10,000 might, you have a stat buff that's 8%, so it's going to be that 10,000 might times 8%, and that's what your end might will be. That's not how stat buffs work in this game. They're all additive. So let's break that down and illustrate an example so that everyone can understand exactly how stat buffs work in DCUO Online. So to begin, we need to go back to the very beginning, and what I mean by that is we need to take off everything to find our actual starting might, which in this case is going to be 239. So if you take off all your gear, all your artifacts, all your augments, make sure that you don't have any skill points spec'd, make sure that either you're not in a league or you just don't have league buffs active, make sure that your generator mods are not might, you will have no sources of might whatsoever active, and that's where you're going to get that 239, and this is where we start to build from. So let's get into it here. So in order to properly illustrate where stat buffs come from, how they stack additively for both might, precision, power, restoration, health, doesn't matter. This is the same core foundational mechanic across the game, so all the stats can be the same. This is just from an example from might point of view. So we need to find the three sources of stats and then calculate our base might, because that's where everything is going to be based off of. So you saw previously the base might without gear is 239. So now we have to work in everything else. So taking a look, a first source is going to be gear. So based on the filming of this video, this is all episode 47 gear. So CR 448 max CR. So I got the weapon, OP head, neck, OP back, chest. So you need to add up each piece of gear, and that'll be your total might from that first source. The second source is going to be the additional stats. So we've got skill points, adaptive augments, you're going to have 2 of them. Origin augments, you're going to have 4 times of them. And then generator mods, you're going to have 4 times. Now, to where to find the skill point stat, because this is going to be different. Well, not necessarily different, but it's going to be different depending on how many skill points you have. So if you go into your skill point tree, you can see here on the left-hand side, I've got 385 skill points into might, and it says right here, so plus 10% power, might, weaponization rating, power, and then here, 16,659 might. So depending on what your skill points are or what you have into that tree, your precision, doesn't matter. That's where that number comes from, that's 16,659. And then when you're doing the calculation, you just have to make sure you're times in this by 2, 4, and 4. So that's the second source. The third source is going to be the base might stats of your artifacts you have equipped. So if we go back to our artifacts, if we look at transformation card, it's got 765 might, 1275, 1275. We're not looking at the 5% might, 5% might. That's the buffs that we're going to be working at later. We need to find the base might first, which is going to be those base stats. And that gives us that here. And then if we add up those 3 sources, from the gear, from all the additional sources and artifacts, and then plus the base might, we get our base might without gear, I should say. We get our base might figure. So in this case, at max CR, max stats, with these 3 artifacts, it's going to be 261,082 might. And then this is where everything else is calculated from. So you take this number. So basically the base might modifier, this is basically, and then we look into the might modifiers. So skill point focus, that's if you're going into your skill point tree, super powered or hybrid, you see 10% might. So just by putting 1 skill point into either of these, I'm going to get 10% might. So that's where that's factored in. We've got skill points, 10%. Elite affinity mods, that's going to be 2%, so 1% for A, 1% for B. Your league buffs is 3% might. Your adaptive augments, so if we go into our augments here, if I'm in content, you see where it says kryptonite, plus 3% might power weaponization rating, and that's for both. So that's where that 6% comes into. And then artifacts is 13%. So if we go back to the artifacts this time, we've got 3% from transformation card, 5% for Linear's amulet, 5% for E-bombs. So that's 13% from the artifacts. So if we add up all those, that's 44%. So we have a 44% modifier on our base might just with these stats. And then from there, you'd work on everything else. I'll show you some examples here, but that's basically, this is the easiest way because this is what you're going to be sitting in content with. So based on this base might figure of 261,082, if I multiply that by 44%, 1.44, which is going to be representing these buffs, I'm going to have 375,958 might. Right now, I've got 360,293. And why is that? Because I'm not in Bottled City. So that means if I want to calculate my might without the adaptive augment buff, that 6%, I just have to remove 6% from this modifier. So if I change it to 1.38, I get 360,293. And in my stats in the Watchtower or House of Legends, 360,293. So I can calculate exactly. So I'm not actually at a 44% modifier. I'm at a 38% modifier. Now, if I change that to 1.44, it's going to be 375,958. So I'm going to warp to Bottled City, Bottled DC. So now the 6% additive buff from my augments is going to be active. I didn't think it would actually take that long to warp into it, but I guess that's the test server for you. So now I have that full 44% modifier, and I'm at 375,958. 375,958, and if I just remove this just so I didn't spoil it, 375,958. So I can calculate exactly what my buff's going to be, depending on what else other buffs to add in, because they all add together. 10, 10, 2, 3, 6, 13, 44%. I'm at a 44% modifier. So there's no guesswork. I'm not taking, my stats in here, then multiplying that by whatever new buff I have. So for example, let's look at Starfire. So if we add Starfire, didn't matter. So Starfire is an 8% might buff as long as I use my weapon buff. So if we take our calculator here, so if you're thinking that it works by multiplying, so 375,958, if I'm saying, okay, this is my might, now I'm going to times that by 8%, that means after I hit Starfire, my might would be 406,000. But that's not how that works. If we go back to the chart here, I'm adding 8%. So basically I'm adding in Starfire at 8% on top of my current buffs, which is 1.44. So that means I need to change this to reflect that extra 8% modifier. So if I change that to 1.52, I got 396,844. Now if I hit the Starfire buff, I'm gonna have to wait for E-Bomb and Linearis just to time out for a sec. So now if I just have Starfire Actor, 396,844. 396,844. So that's all I'm doing is just I'm increasing the modifier. And this works the exact same if I was going to do, so if we look at to Linearis and E-Bomb, so if I max out 10 stacks at 3% each, so that's 30% max stacks for Linearis and 30% max stats for E-Bomb. So same thing, if we go back here, so my base might sitting in just the Bottled City with the augment buffs is 1.44. And I need to add 60 to that. So if I change that and add 60% to that modifier, I'm going to be at a modifier of 2.04. So that means my might with max stacks for both E-Bomb and Amulet is going to be 532,607. So if I, just so I don't risk dying here, let me just put on detonate here. And we're going to get to 10 stacks. So I'm at 10 stacks, 532,607, 532,607. And that'll apply for everything else. So that's 30% from Amulet, 30% from E-Bomb. If I take Bottled City and add 1% to that, if I proc my white neck, that's giving me an extra 2% there. So everything in terms of buffs, that's a might buff, is all going to stack additively to that base might modifier. And that's all it is. So I'll put this into Google Sheets so you can see it as well, and you can kind of play off it as well, or if you want to adjust this to say precision or health or whatever you want to do. But that's all it is. That's how you calculate and know exactly what your buff's going to be. So there's a lot of situations where some people think it's not working proper. Same thing when Starfire buff came out. I saw the comments on the forums about it saying it's not exactly 8%. Or people try to calculate their augments. So if I take off my augments and put on something else, they're think, oh, well, is 6%, 3%, I'm going to multiply what I have there by 6% when I put my augments on. Because same thing, if I go back to like the House of Legends here, just as a kind of example if you're not understanding it. So now I don't have that 6%, so I'm at 360,293. And you would think if they worked based off multiplying, so if my might right now is 360,293, and if I'm going to go to Bottle DC, it's going to be times 6%, then my might should be 381,910. If that followed by that multiplying what you saw by 6%, but we know that's not the case. And it's unfortunate. It'd be nice if the game told you what your base might was. So now what you thought it was going to be 381,910, but my might is actually 375,958, which we already based off that calculation before. So it'd be really nice if this game showed us this figure somewhere, because then you could easily calculate it without doing all this extra math. Because the base, the might stat that we see is after all the modifiers. So, I mean, and this is more of just kind of like an FYI for players to know. I mean, you're not necessarily at any distinctive advantage knowing this base modifier. It's just that you can properly understand where if you're trying to say, okay, if I have this buff and this buff, if I have a Nubia buff, if I have the Shazam buff at the same time, or if I pop everything, what is my might going to be? You don't have to actually just guesswork and do it on supply drops or something like that, or have someone help you. You can calculate it all beforehand. It's all math. So you can calculate exactly what your might or any other stats going to be in this game based on, you just have to know this base might figure or your base figure with gear, and then just basically stack up all the buffs from there after that. So hopefully this is a better understanding in terms of how the stat buffs work in this game. Hopefully it can be an educational to players that were interested. If you have any questions, you can certainly ask them in the comment section. And like I said before, I'll post this in Google Sheets so that you can kind of play around with it well. I mean, there's nothing in terms of complicated equations or anything like that. All it is just adding up all the stats together and making sure that you're just multiplying them together. And then from there, you're just calculating the base might figure. So like I said before, you're at a 44% modifier anytime just sitting in content. If you're going to be less, then it's going to be the 38, just because you're not accounting for the augment buffs. So take care, guys. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next video.